In this part of the lab, we're going to explore how a ray of light is refracted through a prism. So we have a glass prism here, and you can sort of see the incoming ray. So there's the laser beam. Again, I'll turn off the lights in a second so you can see this better. There's one part that's actually reflected off, but we're more interested in the one that's going through, that's refracted through. So it hits the surface between the air and the glass, it's refracted, passes through, and then when it goes from glass to air again, it's refracted again, and now you see the outgoing ray. So what we want to do here is we want to take a bunch of measurements of the angle of incidence and angle of refraction at both faces, at the first face right here, and at the second face when it goes from air to glass, and then from glass back to air. And then using those angles and something called Snell's law, and I'll explain this more carefully in another video, you're going to calculate the index of refraction of glass relative to air, that ratio. Okay, so let me turn off the lights for a second and let's see if we can see this a little bit better. I traced out the prism, so I outlined the prism. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see here, but so this is the incoming ray from the bottom. I'm going to mark it again, and I'll draw a nice line in later with a ruler. And then the outgoing ray, I'm going to mark that, and I'll draw it in with a ruler. Okay, so let me turn the light back on, and this will be much clearer when I start drawing in the rays here. Okay, so here's the incoming ray. So this is the laser beam that was coming in. So it was going in this direction. And then the one that was coming out is this one right here. And then the one that passed through the glass, I can just basically connect these two together. So that was something like this going through. Okay. Now, we want to make several measurements. If you look at your table, there's a bunch of different values that we need to measure. Actually, one of them is what's called the prism angle itself. And that's just the angle of the prism. So that's this angle right here. And if this is an equilateral prism, your guess as to what the angle should be is just 180 divided by 3, right? So it should be 60 degrees. So let's actually measure this and see what we get for a value. Actually, let me make that a little better so you can see exactly where the tip is. Okay, so if I measure this, yeah, I'm getting pretty much 60 degrees. So I'm going to call it 60 degrees. So this, again, is the prism angle, and that measurement is 60 degrees. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to measure the angle of incidence and the angle of refraction at each face, right? At the first face, which is right here, and the second face right here. Okay, so before we do that, we need to draw in a line that's perpendicular to the face, because remember, all the angles are always measured perpendicular to the face. Let me do that right here. draw this a little bit lighter so you can see it. So something like that. Okay, and then I'll do the same thing for the other side, the other face. So again, I'm going perpendicular to the prism. So maybe there to there. So that's the line that's perpendicular. Okay, so in terms of the angle, or the angles, there's actually 4 more angles that you need to measure. So in this case, this angle right here, this is the first incident angle, so we call this I1, which is on your diagram if you look on your handout. Then the first refracted angle, so it's going from, remember this is like air, this is glass, right? And here's actually glass, I'll just put a G for glass, and then it goes back to air again. Okay, so this angle right here is R1, the first refracted angle. Then the angle in here that it makes with respect, again, to the perpendicular, this is going to be I2. So this is I2. And then finally, the angle that the refracted beam makes with the perpendicular back out in the air, this is going to be R2. Okay, so we need to measure those 4 angles. Here, I'll move it like this so you can see it better. Okay, so for I1, looks like I'm getting around 46 degrees. So I1 is going to be 46. For R1, maybe 22 degrees. So R1 is 22. For I2, say like 35 degrees. And then finally R2, you can probably do this one right here. That's around 55 degrees. Okay, and again, the prism angle, which is called A, we measured that to be 60 degrees, and that's great because theoretically it should be around 60 degrees, right? It's in equilateral triangle. Okay, so that should be all the data that you need for this part of the lab with the Prism. There's one slight correction on the Prism experiment. I measured these angles a little more carefully, and it turns out R1 is more like 23 degrees. So I'm going to change that to 23. Okay? So use those values in your calculations. 43 degrees for I1, 23 degrees for R1, 35 degrees for I2, 55 degrees for R2.